was he kind of trapped into lying? That's really the debate right now. 24 hours after Flynn's lawyers were effectively trying to tell a judge, our client was forced into a situation he shouldn't have been forced to in the first place. And the problem with that are prosecutors, and more specifically, Bob Mueller. Bob Mueller comes out and says, essentially, no, there was no entrapment going on. He lied, he lied, he lied. He lied to the vice president. He lied to the chief of staff at the time, Reince Priebus. He lied to the president of the United States. So a liar is a liar, and it's his pants on fire. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, the second hour Cavuto Live. We're very happy to have you. We're following the ins and outs on this because this could turn out to be a key crucial area in the ongoing Mueller investigation, where it's going, and what the prosecutor is hinting at in some comments he made in defense of the actions that he has taken against Flynn and indeed others. It was an issue that I raised with Devin Nunes, the soon-to-be former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, on this very subject of when a lie is a lie, especially with Michael Flynn. Take a look. He still pleaded guilty to lying to federal agents. He did that. He admitted he lied. So I don't know whether there's a there to this, especially when we get clarification from Mueller's office, which might give us, to your point, where this investigation is going. Quoting here, nothing about the way the interview was arranged or conducted caused the defendant to make false statements to the FBI. Are you saying that that's not the case?
Well, look, I am very well familiar with what was said at that time, and I have been briefed. A lot of this is still classified. When you're having several calls and long conversations with people, and then you're later interviewed 45 days to 90 days later about this, and you don't remember a piece of your conversation, look, did you forget about it? Is it a lie? I think the whole thing's ridiculous. This is an embarrassment for our country to a three-star general like this, a war hero, to be doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing, talking to the.
But I just want to be clear, Congressman, you don't think General Flynn lied because he said he lied?
No, and neither did the agent.
Okay, so he agreed and said and pled guilty to lying.
Yeah, that's right. And look, at the end of the day, he was being, I think, I have not talked to General Flynn, okay, but the guy had to sell his house. He was out of money.
No, I understand that, but I guess you're making a victim. I know how much you honor the guy and praise the guy in a great military and very illustrious career, but he admitted he lied, and he did lie. He told investigators he lied, and that's just the reality, right?
Right, but it's also called entrapment. So if he lied, or if he admitted he lied to in the investigation so that he didn't lose.
No one had a gun to his head, though, sir. No one, you know what I'm saying? So,
well, Neil, if somebody comes to you and takes your house and all your money and your retirement and you're out of money, and the prosecutors say, well, you could admit to lying, Neil.
Well, that's not what happened, though.
That's exactly what happened.
No, you could admit to lying. You're saying that they actually said that and set this up so that he was forced to say what he said, when in fact he had agreed to what he had said and acknowledged what he had said many times.
This is only my personal opinion.
All right, Devin Nunes yesterday, Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law professor today. Alan, without getting too much into the weeds here, where do you think this whole thing is going, and what the Mueller folks seem to be indicating by saying they didn't entrap anyone?
Well, first, I think everybody's asking the wrong question. They're asking, did Flynn lie, or did the FBI act improperly? The answer to both of those questions is yes. Flynn lied. He shouldn't have lied. He wasn't made to lie. But the FBI acted improperly. Do we really want law enforcement to go around engaging in morality testing or truth testing of everybody? Bring people in a room, tell them they don't need a lawyer, relax, this is just a nice conversation. They know the answers to the questions because they have the transcripts in front of them. Then they give you an opportunity to lie. Flynn lied. Okay, I'm not defending Flynn. But I think every civil libertarian should be concerned about that tactic of law enforcement, which is widespread and which Judge Ellis condemned. What Judge Ellis was saying is what Mueller is doing is trying to find low-hanging fruit, figure out every way to get them to commit a crime. It's their fault if they commit the crime. And then squeeze them so that they'll sing or compose. Welcome to how special counsel operate. And so the question is not about Flynn, it's about the FBI. Now, it is conceivable when you have two FBI agents saying he didn't seem to lie to us, and he knew they had those transcripts, what would his motive be to lie? It is conceivable that he had momentary forgetfulness. So that's possible. And Nunes is absolutely right about the pressure. Once he lied, the pressure to plead guilty, because I said on day one he could win this case. Why did he plead guilty? He pleaded guilty because they threatened his son, because they took away all of his money. 90-something% of all people plead guilty, including, in my experience, some innocent people.
But not at the time of those lies, though. Not at the time in January 2017.
No, there are
right?
two distinctions.
I understand that, but I'm just saying that
there are 2 points.
The reason why I want to raise this distinction with you, Alan, is that in making the comments here and responding to them, the Mueller team essentially said the court should reject the defendant's attempt to minimize the seriousness of those false statements to the FBI. Flynn knew later on, saying that the conversation with Kislyak, they're talking about Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador at the time, was being recorded. So why the big fuss in the first place? I guess what I'm asking you is, how does this advance Team Flynn's ball here? You know what I mean? Like, what happens now?
Well, it doesn't advance Flynn. I think in the end, Flynn did what he did. There were two issues. Did he lie at the time the FBI came to him? The answer to that is yes. Could he have told the truth? Yes. The second is, does the fact that he pleaded guilty prove that he's guilty? Absolutely not. He pleaded guilty because of the enormous pressures on him, even though I think he could have won the case. He could have won the case because it's not a proper function of law enforcement or of a grand jury to ask you a question that they know the answer to. Their function is to get new information. But if they already know the answer and they ask you the question, it's for one purpose only: to test your morality, to test your truthfulness. That is not a proper function of a grand jury. And I think a lot of American jurors would say to themselves, I don't want to live in a country where that kind of morality test is imposed on citizens on a daily basis. If you're going to commit a crime, commit a crime. But the FBI shouldn't be sending people in telling you not to have counsel and hope maybe you'll commit a crime so that then they can squeeze you and get you to sing or compose. That's not the way American law enforcement should operate. And every civil libertarian, Democrat or Republican, should be concerned about this. And if the shoe were on the other foot, if this were done to one of Hillary Clinton's people, every liberal civil libertarian I know would be up in arms. But today they're enthusiastically applauding this FBI technique.
All right, Alan Dershowitz, thank you. I want to get the read on all this from Emanuel Cleaver, Missouri Congressman, prominent Democrat. I do have other things to touch on with you, sir, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to address what Alan Dershowitz just did, and on this probe and what many of your colleagues are saying should be more House investigations as a result. What do you say?
Well, you know, the professor and I probably disagree. He knows obviously much more about law. But when you become a lieutenant general, when you're the national security advisor, you're working with FBI agents, you're working with people in the intelligence community, and you know that you can't lie. When I was mayor here in Kansas City, some of the people in the administration got into trouble. The FBI agents came into my office, and I said to them as they began to ask questions, look, I already know that I've got to tell you exactly the truth about the people who I knew. And I think most people, even, you know, out on the streets, you don't have to be a crook or guilty or anything to know that you can't lie. Now, I don't know much more about what happened during that interrogation with the general, Flynn. You know, I would hate to believe that he was just, you know, badgered and beaten into lying and really felt like, I've got to lie. I hope that's not the United States.
You know, Congressman, it occurs at a time when Michael Cohen this week gave his first television interview to George Stephanopoulos of ABC on the separate issue of Michael Cohen. He's going off to jail for 3 years for essentially hush money payments to two women. Now, he claims that the president forced him into that. The president says just the opposite, telling R. Harris Faulkner that he never told him to do, that is Michael Cohen, anything illegal. But there's a lot here on the table, and many of your colleagues are eager to start investigations, inquiries, to look into all of them. Do you think that should wait for the ultimate Mueller probe findings to come out, or to get them going concurrently?
Well, first of all, I have been opposing. In fact, here yesterday, the top of the fold in the Kansas City Star, Emmanuel Cleaver opposes impeachment, and along with a newly elected person from across state line. I believe that we need to have the Mueller investigation completed. I think it's absolutely ridiculous and even stupid to want to impeach someone before the investigation is over, while at the same time you're saying we need to protect the investigation. Now, I do think that there is some oversight that probably needs to be done. I think from what I have heard from Speaker-to-be Pelosi, she does not want the committee chairs moving into let's impeach Donald Trump. I think the public elected us to do some things for them. On the stage after I was won re-election, my speech was, I was not elected to go to Washington to try to impeach Donald Trump, but to work for you. And and that's what I've been hearing from most of my colleagues, not all of them. But I do think that the oversight committees are almost unavoidably going to have to look at some things. Mueller's investigation should come first. In other words, I hope that Adam Schiff, I believe he will, with Richard Nadler over at the Judiciary, will always coordinate with Mueller to say, you know, should we bring this person in? Is this going to interfere with the investigation? Nothing should interfere with the investigation that Mueller is doing.
So when Adam Schiff says things like, you know, this is the type of behavior that prompts someone to go to jail, I'm paraphrasing, don't you think that's a little bit much?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that he's a former prosecutor. I think sometimes when we all get into these situations, we begin to talk in ways that could be interpreted a number of ways, in some of the ways we wouldn't want.
Well, you don't.
I know
You
Adam
don't
Schiff
do
to be
that.
kind of
You
a
don't
cool
do that,
head.
and at great risk to your party, you don't play that game.
Well, I try not to. You know, I try to also not do that when I'm talking to my wife either. That's far more dangerous than doing it on television.
Tell me about it. But let me ask you, Congressman, I do want to touch on something I know is near to you, the future of the Affordable Care Act, i.e. Obamacare. A judge in Texas shooting down a key tenet of that, the individual mandate that forces people to buy health insurance. That essentially moves its underpinning and might make the law itself unconstitutional, assuming this were to go up to the Supreme Court. Are you worried that this whole thing is going to get shot down?
Well, I am worried, yes, and I think others ought to be worried. You know, I think most of the people around here in the Midwest campaigned that they believed that we needed to maintain some portions of the Affordable Care Act, particularly those portions that are getting 90% approval ratings in polling data, which is, you know, you stay on your parents' insurance till you're 26 years old, or you have that option that pre-existing conditions would be protected and so forth. And so I think if it goes to the Supreme Court, as I understand the ruling, the entire act would be invalidated based on if the Supreme Court voted as such. So all of that would be gone. And so then we have to start from scratch. A lot of people are going to get hurt in the meantime, because putting a health care bill together, we've been trying to do it since the Nixon days. Well, frankly, it actually goes all the way back to Roosevelt. And so I am frightened that if the Supreme Court rules that the Texas ruling was constitutional or in harmony with the Constitution, then you know, we're going to lose the whole 9 yards, and we'll have to start over. And I don't think people are going to want to do that.
We shall see. Congressman, I hope you have a Merry Christmas. Thank you very much.
You as well.
All right, Emmanuel Cleaver. Taking a quick peek at what's happening in Paris right now. The protests go on, and they're not easing up. Even though Emmanuel Macron has done everything in his power, he said, to try to satisfy them, they're still not satisfied. They haven't done enough. This is the cost of big government. They don't want to bear it. Is this just the start of something bigger? After this.
At mintmobile.com.
He did it. He knew about it. Couldn't happen without his knowledge. I'm not going to forgive it. Big deal. We need to come down hard, because if we don't, we're opening up Pandora's box.
So when the president doesn't move on this, and he has stood by the Saudi prince, and then you hear yesterday the Saudis want to curtail oil production, regardless of whether
there's a glut of the market right now.
Right, and they obviously want to lift the price. It could lift the price on us. Yeah. But that's a heck of a thank you to the president who's trying to stand by him. Right?
Number one, they're going to sell oil, or they will starve. They're going to do what's best for the Saudi economy, which is oil-based. Weapons. I'm worried that this guy is crazy enough to kill a journalist in a consulate in Turkey. Why would you give that guy weapons that he may give to the Russians or the Chinese? As long as MBS is around, I'm not going to deal with Saudi Arabia as a normal relationship, because there's nothing normal about him.
So you wouldn't even deal with them on anything?
They need us 1,000 times more than we need them. They would be speaking Farsi in a week.
Have you told this to the president?
Yeah.
And what does he tell you?
I'm telling it to him right now.
What does he say?
Well, he's the president. He's got to think about these things differently. The Congress took Bush on about detainee policy, and we came up with a Detainee Treatment Act. Obama didn't want to do anything against the Iranian regime, but we went ahead and sanctioned Iran. Every now and then, Congress goes its own way. I like the president. He's right about the strategic relationship being important. I think he's wrong to believe that MBS, we can ignore what he did. It undercuts the relationship.
But it sounds like he will not do that.
Who? The president? The Congress will. What we're going to do is we're going to stop sales to Saudi Arabia of equipment until something changes, until the people held accountable for killing this man are actually held accountable.
All right, so there's a clear divide there among the Lindsey Grahams and a majority of Republican and Democratic senators who supported with getting away from our support of the Saudis when it comes to the ongoing war in Yemen. The read right now from former USS Cole Commander Kirk Lippold. Where do you think this is going, Commander?
I think it's going to be interesting to see. Right now, obviously, the Senate voted to cut off support for Saudi Arabia as they're waging the conflict in Yemen against the Houthi rebels backed by Iran. But by the same token, the House has said we're not going to do anything. So nothing will happen until the new Congress, new Senate are in place in January, and then we'll see if it gets brought back up. Point blank, the administration needs to go to MBS in Saudi Arabia and say, that was stupid, don't ever do it again. Our strategic relationship is too important to both of us. We must preserve it. But by the same token, this can never happen again. That said, here we've got 1,000 dead Americans at the hands of Iranians because of IEDs in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And where's the umbrage there? Where's the anger there? You hear nothing out of Congress. This is why the American people get upset with them. It's this hypocrisy of getting angry over one thing and not another.
No, you're right about that. But do you worry, Commander, that a reprimand like that, don't you ever do this again? Imagine if you told your kids that, don't you ever murder someone again? And then go to your room. I mean, that there's something almost laughable at that. I mean, what Lindsey Graham is saying, you could agree or disagree with him and a host of others, is that we don't do business with this country until he's out of there. Now, that's a risky, slippery slope as well. But a lot of Republican senators, at least, and many Democrats agree, and we're going to have a Democratic House soon, could force the issue.
The Democrats agree because it's something that President Trump wants to do. The Republicans are doing it because they're outraged by the violence and the horrific nature of this Human Rights Act against this reporter. That said, you have to remember, Saudi Arabia is the only counterbalance that the United States really has in the Middle East. All the other smaller Gulf cooperation countries cannot stand up to Iran alone. Our relationship with Saudi Arabia is strategic in nature. You can have that conversation. It gets done off the press quietly, and we make sure that something like this never happens again. Those that were involved must be held accountable in a public way that is going to satisfy people. But by the same token, we cannot just cut off weapons, walk away and do that. That's grandstanding on Senator Graham's part, and I think that he knows that.
Commander, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Now, here's the irony of that situation the commander just outlined. You'd think the president would get something back from the Saudis for sticking up for them and standing behind them. Then, lo and behold, this week they announced that they're cutting oil production, which is essentially saying you, America, should pay more for gas. That is what they call a real kick in the gas.
Omaha Steaks favorite gift package, a $232 value for just $59.99. Give everyone a gift they can appreciate. Give them the favorite gift package from Omaha Steaks today.
All right, whether you like the president or dislike the president, the fact of the matter is when it comes to the Saudis, he has supported them and had their back, even though many in his own party, and I've been telling you about Lindsey Graham here on this very show, talking about the fact that he cannot agree with the president's support of the Saudi prince, that the Saudis were clearly behind the killing of al-Khashoggi, the Washington Post journalist, columnist, and there must be some retribution for that. So what does the president get for standing by the Saudis? Well, they announced this week that they're going to try to curtail production to lift oil prices, i.e. gas prices for you, i.e. American taxpayers. How's that for a thank you for the President of the United States? All right, so back with me, Deirdre Bolton, Jonas Max Ferris, and Gary Kalpon. It's a hell of a thank you, right? What do you think?
They have no choice. It's not that oil prices have dropped from 76 to 51. Happened in 2 months. It's somewhat unprecedented, and they weren't ready for it, and they're being crushed. So they're going to drop 800,000 barrels a day, but Russia, who's getting wiped because of this, is going to do 400,000. They literally have to start. I thought they would have done it 2 weeks ago. They're saving themselves at this point in time. But you know what? I don't think it's going to have any effect.
Well, it clearly didn't, because whatever we gained Thursday, we gave back on Friday. So, Jonas, what happens?
The president touched that stupid globe of theirs, and this is the thank he gets. I won't look. Let's back the story a few more weeks back. The reason the price tanked is the president kind of possibly tricked Russia and the Saudis into pumping up oil production because Iran was going to be coming off the market with more aggressive sanctions. And then the sanctions weren't that aggressive. Oh, coincidentally, all of a sudden there's a glut of oil before the midterm elections. Oil price collapses on top of weakening global economies.
You're a very cynical, jaded young man.
It's possible they're a little angry at Trump, even though he, on the surface, again, this is called a coincidence, but it looks like he tricked them into driving the price down.
On this, I would not be blaming the president. I mean, here you have a situation where you want to give the president maybe the benefit of the doubt. The Saudis, I'm saying. I'm not saying it's a responsible view on the Saudis, yay or nay, but it's a heck of a thank you. And I'm just surprised the president hasn't tweeted or comment on their actions to lift oil prices.
Yeah, because the last time I think he tweeted almost directly about this issue, he was essentially asking Saudi Arabia to keep the taps on, right?
Right, and that was Jonas's cynical position, right?
Which was a smart move.
Right?
He tricked them. He made them think he's their super friend. He got them to pump more oil, and now the oil price.
But he didn't kind of make them think he was a super friend as much as, look, don't even think of doing anything that's going to lift oil prices because I'm looking after the American people, right?
And he was, and it worked. And, you know, again, it's a tough situation. The public doesn't like how the Middle East saw it.
But bottom line, it didn't work.
Yeah,
it didn't work.
I think all those waivers came in.
No, because they're just pumping the production back to
But isn't the bigger issue just a slowdown? We've got it. That's what's dictating the price.
I think for the markets and I think for traders, they look at oversupply. We are pumping more than ever. If you look at these weekly inventory numbers, I mean, they're at record highs in general. Russia is pumping more. You know, everyone is pumping more, essentially. So I just think there is an oversupply. And most times when you talk to traders, they're just like, okay, U.S. is.
But is that a reflection of just an economy across the globe, you know, slowing?
Oh, absolutely. Demand is slowing down, but also we are at record lows in this country about how much energy we're using with petroleum products. So you have basically a triple whammy. I don't think OPEC has nearly the power on price that they had years ago.
Sure.
And that's the story behind all this. And I think maybe we can jump up a little bit, but I think we're down for the count because of the economies around the globe that we talked about earlier.
And U.S. production. I mean, we're close to energy independence. We're pretty much there.
I know we're on pre-recession mode, but a couple months ago, when interest rates were going up, everybody thought the global economy was picking up steam, and there was a lot of hedge funds gambling in the oil markets with leverage, thinking it was going to go to $100 a barrel when this happened, and all of a sudden sudden now we're all in flat yield curve recession mode. And those players had to unwind positions that also drove the price down. So a lot of factors took in effect. But again, 3 months ago, we were in a booming global economy. Let's not forget that. That's why the price was high. But it was a lot of gambling, and people used those futures markets to make bets on future economic growth because the price will climb very fast if we get a hot economy.
Real quickly, you're not looking for us benefiting from the world's woes, right?
Oh, no. Listen, we are not immune at this point in time. And I think right now we have issues also. Remember, we've been talking about it a lot.
Right.
The debt and deficits are going to matter when markets come down. Simple as that.
All right, guys, thank you. Final word on that particular subject. A robust, happy, dancing view of the world there. All right, in the meantime, do you think it is worth shutting down the government over about $3.5 billion? That's the difference between Republicans and Democrats over this wall thing. I want you to meet a guy who says, yeah, it is, after this.
Switch system when you buy a gift at Helzberg Diamonds.
All right, we could be just days away from a government shutdown, at least a partial one right now, as the president stakes his reputation and indeed his ground on this issue of border wall funding. He wants $5 billion. Right now, they're looking at about $1.5 billion from Democrats. So if you think about it, this is over $3.5 billion and a $4 trillion plus budget. It's not quite that simple math. But I want to get the read from former acting ICE Director Tom Homan. Now, Tom, your views are this is well worth such a fight, right?
Absolutely. I think the president the other day, when he took ownership of, he's going to take full responsibility for shutting the government down over this border issue. I applaud him for it, because I think it is an important issue, and he's the president. He's doing the right thing.
All right, so it's actually going to be about $25 billion to complete something like this. So this would be a down payment in that direction. If Democrats are coming back, and I know you pointed out the irony of the past that they were for this early in the year, now against it. If $5 billion is a problem, they're going to argue that any more funding is going to be a problem. Then what?
Look, I think we take it year by year, but look, as you said, the Democrats voted for a border barrier in the past, and I've said it many times. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. If you look at the facts, that every place they built a border barrier, border wall, San Diego, El Paso, Yuma, every place they built it, it resulted in a significant decline in illegal immigration and illegal drugs coming across that corridor. So that's proven 100% effective. So what is the downside? I've said this many times. What is the downside on securing our border? What's the downside? Every representative on the Hill should be protecting this country and doing their sworn duty to protect Americans. Border wall's a part of it.
All right, so the fact that this is a wall and not a fence, and I suppose then we replace the fencing where it is, many are coming back, and this might be a little hypocritical on the part of Democrats who are suddenly concerned about a deficit when they weren't, when their party had the full run of the show. Leaving that aside, Tom, I'm just curious what you make of a moving target for this thing, that it could be expensive way beyond what we're talking about.
I'm not into the weeds on the cost. I know some places are going to build a wall, some places are going to be technology, some places there's natural barriers, right, like flood zones. But if you look at the total cost of illegal immigration, the ICE budget is just near $8 billion. The cost of detention, cost of immigration judges, cost of Board of Immigration Appeals, cost of appellate courts. I mean, the cost of illegal immigration in this country is far more than the cost of this wall. So I think it's money well spent to save money down the road in the enforcement life cycle.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the death of this 7-year-old girl in immigration authorities' hands. Many are pouncing on this, using it as a sort of a stick to make their point. What did you think of it?
Well, look, I'm glad you asked that question, because I've been giving speeches for a couple of years on border enforcement rights. Homan is all about enforcing the law. Homan is a hardcore law enforcement guy. And the point that every speech I make, I talk about the other side, the flip side of this coin is, when you entice people to enter this country illegally, more people will die. More people put themselves in the hands of criminal organizations who don't care about them. Border Patrol saved over 2,000 people last year who would have died if they didn't find and rescue them. So when you entice people with low asylum levels, when you entice people saying we want to abolish ICE, when you entice people, we want to build sanctuary cities where you can come into the country illegally and feel safe, you entice people to make this dangerous journey. And unfortunately, people die making that journey. And I feel very badly about this little girl. But, the Border Patrol agents, I'm sure, did the best they could in a very tough situation. But this girl, she was in bad shape when she was apprehended.
You know, we don't know how things could change in Washington. The Interior Secretary announcing that he will be leaving by the end of the year. John Kelly, the Chief of Staff, will leave at the end of the year. Mick Mulvaney will replace him. Kirstjen Nielsen, the Homeland Security Secretary, a close confidant of and worked with John Kelly. She is rumored to be the next to go, and you were rumored to be her replacement.
Yeah, I heard that rumor.
You want to talk about it, or just between me and you? It's no one's hearing this.
Here's what I'll say. I worked for Kirstjen Nielsen for a while. She's working very hard. She is a secretary now. She's a recognized secretary. She's working hard. I think she's doing some of the good things on the border right now. I've been with Kirstjen on the Hill many times trying to shut down these loopholes that cause illegal immigration. So I'm 100% behind Kirstjen. She's in the job, and I support her.
All right. So the turnover at the White House, did you make anything of it? I know the media pounces, 63, 64% turnover. It's a record. Maybe the president's just a tough guy to work for. There have been some tough bosses in private and in public life. Would that ever dissuade you?
No, look, I support this president. And I've said many times, I've worked for 6 presidents. I think this president's done more for border security and safety of this country than any of the 6 I worked for, and I respect them all. I think it's a huge loss, as I said last week. John Kelly, American patriot, American hero, the guy that talked me into coming back from retirement the first time. I'm sorry to see him go. I think it's a loss for the administration, but I think we got a strong president. I think he's right on this issue.
All right, Tom Homan, it's always a pleasure. Hope you have a Merry Christmas.
You too, sir.
All right, Tom Homan. Tom Homan. You know, it's interesting. If you followed yesterday's stock market, it was a wacky day. We were down to almost 500 points. What have I told you? About a quarter of that was because of one stock. Just one stock. After this.
Get your new favorite pair of jeans today. I'm Taylor, available on the Apple App Store or Android.
Welcome back, everybody. Johnson & Johnson is denying a report now claiming the company knew that its baby powder contained asbestos, I should say, for maybe quite a few years. Let's get the read right now from Deirdre Bolton on the implications this has had.
Neil, this was a huge stock story on Friday, so you just saw that down arrow on your screens. I mean, the stock fell about 10%. It wiped out close to $40 billion of J&J's market value, and it made up for about 25% of Friday's drop. So it was the stock's worst day since 2002, where there were some questions about what it had reported on some of its products. So that's a long time. So Reuters, just getting to the heart of the matter, reporting that J&J had asbestos in its baby powder, knew about it for decades, and worked to keep that knowledge quiet. So Reuters citing documents and testimony from 1971 to the earlier 2000s, and it claims that J&J executives and mine managers and doctors and lawyers, a whole kit and caboodle of people, were aware that sometimes the company's raw talc and finished powders tested positive for small amounts of asbestos. So the reporting also depicts J&J's successful efforts to influence U.S. regulators, their plans to limit asbestos in cosmetic talc products, and scientific research on the health effects of talc. As far as J&J, they call the story an absurd conspiracy theory. They published a full statement. I pulled part of it for you here. I'm just putting the 2 lines that count in my mind the most. The Reuters article is one-sided, false, and inflammatory. Thousands of independent tests by regulators and the world's leading labs prove our baby powder has never contained asbestos. So obviously, you got to believe one side or the other. Contextual purposes, J&J has faced thousands of lawsuits alleging its talc baby powder products do contain asbestos, caused ovarian cancer. So some juries have sided with J&J. Others have been unable to reach verdicts. The most famous verdict against the company, a Missouri jury ordering J&J to pay more than $4.5 billion. That involved a class action. It was 22 women and their families. A judge affirmed the verdict in August. J&J has vowed to appeal it. But, Neil, J&J, one of the most widely held stocks ever. And the analyst community, I would say, is pretty pragmatic. JP Morgan Chase put out a note on Friday saying the price drop was overdone. And they say from a longer term perspective, perhaps investors should even consider buying the stock on Monday. JPM does the math saying J&J's exposure to the talc risk probably won't even come close to this roughly $40 billion, Neil, that it did lose in market cap on Friday. So JP Morgan not even just getting putting a dog in the fight, just saying, listen, if you just look at the $40 $40 billion market cap. Even if J&J gets sued more, they're not going to pay that out.
Yeah, wow, the rest of the other stocks in the Dow Jones Industrials, I mean, just by itself.
Yeah, no, Friday, it just dropped like a stone.
Absolutely. All right, thank you, Deirdre Bolton, on all of that. All right, well, a shutdown could be coming for the United States government, at least a partial one, and both parties are lining up to say, well, don't blame us. After this.
Clearly, there's a lot of dissatisfaction in France. There's a lot of dissatisfaction in the UK and even here in Germany. In France, I think it's clear that we can't have protectionist policies. We've got to have free and fair trade and trade policies. We've got to believe in capitalism. And I think that people don't want to take the brunt of policy programs that are clearly not geared towards them.
All right, our ambassador to Germany, Rick Cornell, talking about the protests that have been going on all day. Things are a little bit quieter now along the Champs-Élysées in Paris. But again, there's been a lot of friction there over a government big enough to give folks a lot of the stuff they want. But apparently the problem is paying for it. Back with me is Kat Timpf and Jessica Tarloff, and we've got Nan Hayworth. Kat, the issue again is just how far can governments go to give people stuff and then expect that stuff to be paid for. There are limits, obviously, but how does this play out?
Well, what's interesting is that it seems to be playing out in favor of the protesters. They've already gotten some of the things that they want. And it's interesting because that doesn't really happen in the United States. And I think one reason for that is there's more widespread support for these protesters beyond just the protesters themselves. A poll showed that 68% of people in France actually support this movement, where I think in the United States we almost kind of look down on protesters a lot, like, oh, you're annoying, you're blocking traffic, you know, don't these bums have to work? And it's a lot different in France.
And all the protesters to the protesters sound exactly like that.
That's my protester.
They just have a French accent.
They do, yeah.
I can't do it
French accent. I was practicing it in the green room, but it wasn't ready in time.
But the whole nature of what they're protesting is, in this case, these are people who feel disenfranchised. You know, they do live, as you mentioned, Neil, and you're right. They live in a society in which entrepreneurialism, enterprise, the things that we value that allow us to rise and to be independent, have been overwhelmed entirely by an enormous government structure that can impose on them in this way. And they're saying, well, we're going to take care of climate change by taxing your gas. And they say, well, why are we the ones constantly being required to pay for it? In this country, you know, our street protesters tend to be arguing for more government imposition.
Right.
Yes.
You know,
but you know what's interesting in all of this, and I follow the poll numbers of all the major world leaders, and it's interesting whether you're talking Macron or Angela Merkel in Germany, Theresa May in Britain, what's been happening across the globe is their numbers combined aren't what Donald Trump's are right now.
It's quite amazing.
And it's amazing how widespread it is. And these are the same folks who were snickering at him last time he was in Europe. I don't know who's right or wrong on this, but I do find it's like upside down world now.
Well, all the countries that we're talking about do have free and fair elections, so we'll find out who is right there. Angela Merkel.
Well, wait a minute. You're not implying that we do not.
No, I'm not. I'm saying this isn't going on in the Philippines or in Russia. So people will have their day to vote them out if that's what they choose to do. Macron is at 26% right now, and if you know, follow the news like we do, you would think that he had 100% approval with
That's
he
still
has
more
the
popular
swagger
than Nancy Pelosi, actually.
All right, you had to get in the dig. We were having a Nancy-free day here now, and I still loved her last week. But it is important to think about that, and Rick was correct to point out that this is something that is going on all over Western Europe. But in these countries, they also have organized labor on a larger level than we do. They have societal benefits that many on the left would like us to have across the board, you know, a better education system for all, health care for all,
but also enormous unemployment.
They do, absolutely, which is what Macron is being served with
But we
right
might
now.
follow them if we shut our government down this week. Someone's going to take the blame for that.
Well,
now, the president says he is
it.
happy to take the blame
Senate
for it.
Democrats.
Right.
Senate Democrats.
Now, where does that go?
Where does what go? The shutdown?
Shut down.
I think that Trump will take the blame for it, but I don't think any of his supporters will care because they'll say, oh, he's doing it for border security. He's standing up for this wall. He's not backing down the way other Republicans have in the past. So I don't think it'll affect him politically at all.
No, I agree.
Nancy Pelosi laying it out with Chuck Schumer in the White House that would be a bad a bad move. I'm just wondering politically how you think it falls out.
Well, I think we were talking about this yesterday on the Outnumbered couch with Chris Wilson, who worked for Ted Cruz, Republican, and he even admitted no matter who was actually responsible for shutdowns, Republicans consistently get the blame for it. That's just the way that it works.
Well, they didn't get the blame for the last one. That didn't last long.
It didn't last long, and I feel as though Republicans are really only the ones who use that term. Democrats don't remember it anymore. They remember now Nancy Pelosi fact-checking President Trump to his face about it, and President Trump saying, I'll take the blame here.
Well, two things are wrong with what you said. First of all, you're quoting another show you're on.
Sorry, this is the only show I have ever been on.
Exactly. And the other, this idea that, it tends to represent a pox on only Republican houses. I just wonder this go-round whether we're sadly getting used to it and no one really cares.
Well, I think there is a lot of, I was in Congress, as we all know, Neil, and there is a lot of cynicism, rightly placed. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that individual districts expect certain things of their members of Congress. They want their members of Congress to bring home certain benefits, bring home the bacon. And yet, when that occurs on a mass scale, then we tend to be very dissatisfied as taxpayers because we're the ones paying for bloated, inefficient government.
Can I also add, and this loops back to what we were talking about in our first segment of health care, that is the #1 issue for Republicans and Democrats. I think that the president, who has spoken about health care in a much more calming way than a lot of other Republicans, saying, I want to make sure people have entitlements, I want to make sure pre-existing conditions are protected, could do a lot to move off the immigration talk. I know he's never going to be able to give it up, and for the rallies,
I don't see that happening.
But it would be tactically more intelligent to talk about the things that the American public said was the #1 issue.
I don't see Democrats giving that up either.
I think giving up the border wall stuff? No, I don't think so, but hopefully
you can be just as stubborn insisting that there be no funding for a border wall as you can be for funding.
$1.6 billion, and it's a baby fence, and that's it.
Real quickly, Nick Mulvaney coming in as the acting chief of staff. What do you think of that?
I think that he has a great relationship with President Trump, and I think that was what he was really looking for, as a loyal guy. There was that clip that came out from 2016 of him saying that he's a terrible person, but hopefully he can look past that and say we've played golf together since then. We're friends, and that they can have a good relationship.
Look at all the stuff Lindsey Graham said. And,
Absolutely. And that I know Mick personally, brilliant, dedicated, effective.
So it's going to work out.
Can I make my negative point?
Yes.
I'm ready. Okay, so Mick Mulvaney will be the only chief of staff that actually has been confirmed by the Senate, since he's not giving up his role, which means that he can be brought in front of Congress to testify, and we could hear a lot more about what goes on in the Oval.
It's a very effective office.
You're always a hater, aren't you?
Haters
We're going to take a quick break here and discuss even more after this.